Welcome in, everybody. I'm here with my good friend Garrett Greenlee of the Football Analysis YouTube channel. Garrett, dude, 10 hires this cycle. I feel like we've been texting each other back and forth for weeks. I'm just excited to bounce some ideas back and forth with you, share some takes to the good people here joining us live for the show. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. I know you get this as a Minnesotan, but it's crazy that, what 2 days of like temperatures above 30 degrees can do to the mental health after like a month of like one day in the past, 60 that was above 30 degrees. So it's been incredible to actually experience temperatures above 35 degrees again.
I couldn't agree more. And although over here it's, 18 plus, but I'll take it. I'll take 18 plus with the sun starting to melt the ice on my driveway a little bit. Yeah, such a bummer we couldn't get down to the Senior Bowl. You and I both dealt with some very frustrating travel predicaments trying to get down there along with a lot of fellow analysts. But it's good to see you for the first time since all that happened. So for today's show, my good people in the chat, and by the way, if you guys could like the stream, subscribe, all that good stuff really does help. And check out Garrett's channel if you're not already. But the two of us here, we're going to go through all of the 10 head coach hirings here. We expect that to take about an hour and a half or so. And then I am going to actually let Garrett go. And at that point, I'll get into all of the other coordinator stuff, my quick thoughts on all of that. And if there's any pertaining super chats as well, we will circle back to that by the end of the show and maybe blending some of those in where relevant as well. So I'm going to take the lead on this one, if that's cool with you, because my biggest take from this coaching cycle comes from the first team I want to start with here, the New York Giants. And the second this hire happened, was lower on it than I think a lot of people. This to me brought, I think, the same wave of energy that came with the Chargers when they hired Jim Harbaugh. And just as a starting point, my opinion is that John Harbaugh is not his brother Jim. I don't think he's at the same point in his coaching career. He has won the Super Bowl. He's, I believe, a little bit older. If he's not older, he certainly looks and acts a little older. He's much more timid, reserved, almost kind of priestly in his leadership charisma, if you will. And then I was already lower on this, but well, when you hire John Harbaugh, the idea is he's as good as his coordinators, right? The idea was he was supposed to come with Todd Monken. I figured it would come with Anthony Weaver, who actually went and took the Ravens job below Jesse Minter, which surprised me. No, that's not what happens. They first hired Denard Wilson, which is fine. I don't hate Denard Wilson. He was kind of plan B for me looking at this, assuming he was going to go with probably one of those two defensive coordinators that had left in that system that he's familiar with a couple of years ago when McDonald left. So it was either going to be Anthony Weaver or Denard Wilson. So it wasn't a surprise, but Anthony Weaver to me did a better job in his spot, probably with less talent than Denard Wilson did in Tennessee, and is just a much more experienced, more highly regarded candidate across the board. So that was already like not the end of the world, but I would have preferred it to be Anthony Weaver. But then the big whammy, well, there was two big whammies. They let Carmen Bricillo go. That was the very first tweet I had. Their offensive line coach, I said, he has done such a good job. He was brilliant with the Raiders before. I called it a great addition to the Giants when they picked him up. And really within the span of 2 years, this was the best the Giants offensive line has played in a decade. And it's a good looking unit right now, but to lose that guy was a huge loss. Yes, he wanted to follow Brian Daboll, but that's supposed to be the point of John Harbaugh, right? Is he's going to build the best staff. He's going to, convince guys like a Carmen Bricillo that this is where he needs to be, that he should stay in New York. Nope. They kind of go in a different route there, let him go. And then Matt Nagy happens, the offensive coordinator that nobody has any excitement about, that seemed to get the least out of Patrick Mahomes as the offensive coordinator. Now, obviously, he's under Andy Reid there as well. But look, the fact that the Chiefs didn't want Matt Nagy back when Andy Reid will hold on to his guys with a tight grip as much as possible, that tells me a lot about what Andy Reid thinks about Matt Nagy. And I'm not the biggest fan of Matt Nagy. Look, this was going to be a C-graded hire for me. and I won't rant this long about everything. I'll give you an opportunity to speak at some point, Garrett, I promise. This was going to be a C graded hire for me from the get-go. I already had some hesitations with Harbaugh for the reasons I've described. And then you see the coordinators fall into place here. This is a D hire for me. This might be my least favorite hire of the cycle. It could work out. Harbaugh's won a lot of games, but again, I don't think he's his brother. I don't think he's going to be able to just copy and paste that amazing Ravens culture that went far beyond Harbaugh, in my opinion, in Baltimore, with years and years of a great organization building that up. I don't know that his message is going to connect. I know for a fact that his game management has lacked for the last few years, and he doesn't bring a lick of anything to the table schematically, offense or defense. I don't love the coordinator hires. Very skeptical. I'm curious what you think.
Initially, because I know we got into a little like, Marcus and I never have like, arguments. It's more just like, hey, what do you think about this? But whenever this hire was made, I was like, hell yeah, like I'm all for it. And Marcus was like, what are you actually excited about? And I was excited about what you initially said, bringing in Todd Monken to work with Jackson Dart, and then also potentially somebody like Anthony Weaver to follow as well, and to think that basically, hey, this is a really good coaching staff in this division for a team that had a good young quarterback last year that, we didn't see close to what Jackson Dart could be maximized because Malik Neighbors missed most of the year. Cam Scatterby went down about midway through the year. And I was really excited to see what this would look like once you have all three of those guys, potentially, and this is a little further down the road, but potentially even Carnell Tate as well, to get that true big-bodied X receiver in there. And I was really, really excited about the idea of this team. And the Matt Nagy hire, that one really just, for me, it takes the wind out of the sails. And yeah. I was thinking B plus A minus, and then you see the coordinators that Harbaugh brings in, and somebody said this. I think there is some truth to this, where basically, you can be a good offensive mind, or you can be this good coordinator under John Harbaugh, but there's kind of a belief of like, hey, I don't want, or Harbaugh doesn't want to be like challenged, like, repeatedly, if that makes sense, by the guys beneath him type thing. And I'm not a big fan of the coordinators specifically that were brought in under John Harbaugh. There's no selling Matt Nagy to me unless, we see this team finish top 10 or top 12 in points per game next year, and they win 9+ games. Jackson Dart has 30+ touchdowns, and it's because of, how good the offense looks all throughout the year. I'm really underwhelmed, especially with what we thought we were going to get versus what we actually got. And I hope that I hope things change, but unfortunately that's really been a microcosm of the Giants over the past, 7 or 8 years. And like I said, I hope things change. Right now I'd put this in the C+ area, especially once we have everything factored in with the coordinators and with the coaches that John Harbaugh brought with him.
Yeah, totally fair. Yeah. And it probably would have been more of a B for me if they did land those two guys, specifically Todd Monken and Anthony Weaver. I said it the second it happened. It's just, he's only as good as his coordinators. And unfortunately, it is more, basically what I'm trying to say is I will have a grade that the head coach would give, and then it'll slide up and down a little bit based on the coordinators. That sliding scale is going to move a lot more with a guy like Harbaugh, who really doesn't bring a ton to the table, in my opinion. But I'm going to pass the next team over to you. So just to reiterate on the way out of each team, I gave this a D. You gave it a C+, correct?
Yes.
For the Giants? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Everybody loves a good grade. So I'm going to pass the Falcons to you next. We're going to kind of start in the NFC, go clockwise, and then go to the AFC. So I'm going to pass the Falcons to you. Get your thoughts on Kevin Stefanski first.
Yeah, so I like the Kevin Stefanski hire. I think he's an offensive mind. He obviously is an offensive mind. He's an offensive mind for a team that needs it. I also like the fact that they retain Jeff Ulbrich. This is a team that has, quietly, the Falcons are a lot more talented than people realize, quite frankly, because, people really don't talk about the Falcons unless it's to kind of make a joke about how bad the Kirk Cousins contract is, or talk about Bijan Robinson's fantasy impact or anything like that. But the one thing that I will emphasize here with Kevin Stefanski is he was 8-26 in his final 2 years in Cleveland. And I know he had 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks in 2025 and Shedeur Sanders and Joe Flacco. I had to get that one in there.
You had to get it in there.
I had to. I know he had 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks this past year, but he didn't really have a lot.
They almost joined Justin Fields in the Pro Bowl. My God.
And so I know he had the 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks to work with, but aside from that, I mean, Jerry Jeudy was his number 1 receiver last year. He, after having a good year in 20 or in 24, had a really down year this year. He had a case of the drops big time. Outside of Jerry Jeudy, the receivers that he had to work with last year were Cedric Tillman, Malachi Corley. I mean, this was not a good Jamari Thrash. This was not a good team that Stefanski had to work with. The offensive line was banged up repeatedly. There was a lot of questionable decisions above Kevin Stefanski with the offensive side of the ball, and that has honestly really nothing to do with Deshaun Watson. There's been a lot more questionable decisions than just the Deshaun Watson decision. But for all of the coaches that Kevin Stefanski brought with him, I really like all the coaches that he brought with him. I know he brought Tommy Rees to be his offensive coordinator, and there were a couple of other hires that I really liked. He brought in Tanner Engstrand to be their passing game coordinator. He was the Jets offensive play caller and offensive coordinator in 2025, and Alex Van Pelt is the quarterback's coach. He was the Patriots coordinator or offensive coordinator in 2024. And I know it's, you can look at Van Pelt and Tanner Engstrand and say, hey, these guys weren't great in the roles they were in whenever they were play callers, but maybe this is a half delusional belief. But anytime you can have guys that are, former play callers in lesser roles, I'm always an advocate for guys that have, dipped their toe in the water, if you will, at those higher roles, and then putting them in, a lesser role so that they can more or less like succeed in in a smaller role, if you will, that way they can be more efficient with everything. So all things considered, I really like what Kevin Stefanski did. Also, I feel like it should be noted, Bill Callahan is the offensive line coach. That's a big name in terms of position coaches. But all things considered, I really like everything that Kevin Stefanski brought with him to the Big A. And I'll be really eager to see what the future of this team holds with Michael Penix coming off of a torn ACL. But all things considered, with everything that Stefanski is bringing with him, in addition to the fact that they should be a better offense in 2026, rather than having Zach Robinson as the team's play caller, I'm giving this an A-.
All right, an A-. I'm kind of lukewarm on this hire. I've always liked Stefanski. I think he's got a good charisma to him. He's had in years past, he's been a very good offensive mind. But at the same time, I can't quite shake what my eyes have seen in Cleveland the last 3 years. Yes, I like you pointed out, a lot of decisions made outside of his control. It's a reason to give Stefanski kind of a clean slate, which is going to get in Atlanta. And I like that. I want to be clear about that. But I do still think from a scheming perspective, I just have been so unbelievably underwhelmed by Kevin Stefanski. I have seen very little evolution of his offense. I feel like every time he is in there with a new quarterback, there's just not enough done to adjust his system, to hold the QB's hand, make things easier. They had a little bit of a, run, if you could call it, with Joe Flacco, but that was really just chucking deep shots with a heavy amount of turnovers, knowing they have this great defense. It's like, we got to just find a way to get some explosives. It wasn't really creative at all. So for me, I do just wonder if Kevin Stefanski has the offensive prowess that he received such praise for multiple years ago. I do think the second Coach of the Year award that he won is doing a lot of heavy lifting for his reputation when he never should have won that award to begin with, in my opinion. That Browns team was strictly successful because of their defense and Jim Schwartz. I give Kevin Stefanski almost no credit for what happened that year in Cleveland. So maybe that's harsh, but that is what people always say with Stefanski, 2-time Coach of the Year winner. I think he's okay. I think he deserves an opportunity to say, let's see what it looks like outside of Cleveland. But I have some pretty heavy hesitations. I like that you brought up the staff. I had some notes on that as well. I'm not moved by Alex Van Pelt. Very familiar with him. He was a Packers guy for years. It's kind of a closely knit with Aaron Rodgers. One of those Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Aaron Rodgers buddy. And I thought he did a horrible job with Drake May in his first year, to be completely honest, after we've now seen what Drake May is capable of. Just the strides in development, monumental compared to college year to year one was okay. Year one to year two in the NFL has been to an MVP level guy. Bill Callahan, you brought him up.
He's reputation. Yeah.
Legacy name, 70-year-old coach whose track record has not just been adequate, it has fallen off a cliff in the last 5 years. That Cleveland offensive line, it is the core of the Browns' issues. If you watch the Browns, it has been an egregious offensive line that for years was kind of dismissed because it was a lot of the same guys on the roster. But as some of those guys were getting hurt, Cleveland's offensive line is in absolute shambles. They have as big of an offensive line need a couple years, post when they were highly regarded here as anybody. And then he goes to Tennessee and everyone's excited about it. Completely underwhelmed with the job he did in Tennessee. He handpicked J.C. Latham, who's been up and down when there were other tackles in that draft class that I thought would have been better picks and have, frankly, outperformed J.C. Latham with that draft spot. I look at the Falcons offensive line and look, Caleb McGarry is 30 years old coming off an ACL. Jake Matthews is 34 years old. I think Chris Lindstrom, a Pro Bowl caliber right guard, fits this system well. Reminds me a lot of Wyatt Teller here. He should be fine, but he's 29 as well. Reminds me a lot of the aging Browns offensive line. And is Bill Callahan actually a guy that can keep the floor raised here with an offensive line that's going to be very important for all their success here? I'm genuinely worried that Bill Callahan is a 70-year-old man that's not putting in what he once did, and that's fine. But it happens when you're that old. Look at freaking Bill Belichick and what's happened there, and that's Bill Belichick. So I have some concerns. I like keeping Jeff Ulbrich along to bring a positive in here. I think he's going to do a really good job at that defense. So I like that. Like I said, I'm a little bit lukewarm on this. It was probably going to be a C+ for me until I saw the Tanner Engstrand hire. I like that you called that out. I think he got done dirty with the Jets. I don't know why they fired him. I'm going to talk about that later in the show after you head out here. Everything that Stefanski had done reeked of nepotism, a lack of change, everything that had worried me in Cleveland with the lack of innovation and just bringing in all of his guys and familiar minds, guys like Tommy Rees, Alex Van Pelt, Bill Callahan. I'm like, oh God, here we go. Like, where's the new, where are the fresh ideas coming to the table here? I think Tanner Engstrand with his background in Detroit is a good addition here. And that gets it to a B- for me. I'm a little bit of a harsh grader. I think this is a hire that I think could go either way. I can see it working. I can see Stefanski landing on his feet, getting back to being revered as a top 15 head coach or so in the league. Or I could see this kind of flaming out, not able to work with some different pieces in Atlanta. And we're back here in a couple of years talking about a new Falcons head coach.
I will say in defense of Alex Van Pelt, the players that he had to work with were horrendous. Like outside of a couple in 2024. I did want to at least note that because that offensive line in Drake May's rookie year was left to be desired for. Speaking from the Packer fan in Packer land, nobody was all that sad when he headed out of Green Bay. I'll just say that. Okay.
But I will take the Cardinals next here. So our final NFC head coaching hire here. And this is going to be Mike Lafleur. We get a second Lafleur in the NFL. I don't have as many thoughts and opinions on this. I think for me, this is a solid B hire. I think the swing it upside is a really good idea. We've talked about this in the past. Like if you're sitting there, you're the Cardinals, you got to go against probably 3 top 5 head coaches. Not probably, like I think definitely 3 top 5 head coaches, right? You got McVay, Shanahan, and McDonald. Hiring Vance Joseph would have done absolutely nothing for me if you're the Cardinals. At least take a swing at the type of candidate that can lead to these slam dunk hires. And I like Mike Lafleur. I mean, anybody gets a second opportunity post Jets in my mind, whether it's a QB or like we said with Tanner Engstrand or anything like that. That's where coaches and quarterbacks go to die. So this actually reminds me a lot of Clint Kubiak, who has been incredibly highly praised. I see these guys, like I think Clint, he's had more success as a play caller and all that. I would have been more excited about a Clint Kubiak hire here. But when you look at Mike Lafleur, he has called plays in the past. Again, it was for the Jets. It didn't go well. Zach Wilson in his rookie year. But a lot of parallels there, obviously both within that Shanahan system. Both were, I believe, in Washington on that ridiculous staff way back when that is kind of infamous at this point. I could be wrong about that, but the Shanahan McVay connections are undeniable. But Mike Lafleur was 33 years old in 2021 when he was hired as the Jets offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak was 33 years old in 2021 when he was hired as the Vikings offensive coordinator. And Clint Kubiak didn't have a ton of success at first. So I'm totally open to the idea here, 5 years later, going back to work with Sean McVay, that he's going to do a much better job this time around with a lot of fun weapons in Arizona. Obviously, you got Trey McBride. You've got a talented running back room. We'll see what happens with those guys coming back from injuries next year. You've got Marvin Harrison coming back, who I think a lot of people are giving up on a little bit too fast here. He had a very injury-riddled second season. And the breakout of Michael Wilson. Like, you've got a lot of pieces to work with. And then it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Kyler Murray there. I think that could go either way. I don't have a ton of thoughts right now about that, other than I just don't know that they have a great option other than Kyler right now. And I would probably see if he can work with Lafleur a little bit better here and roll that way. But I think it's sound process is what I'll say. It's a B hire to me. We'll see who they get at defensive coordinator. I have a feeling they'll probably just land on Nick Rallis, is probably my guess. There's not a ton of great candidates sitting out there right now. Like, we'll see what happens with Jim Schwartz in Cleveland, Sean McDermott. Wouldn't be surprised if they retain Nick Rallis. But yeah, I think it's good process. I gave it a B.
I'm right there with you. This is one where
change the banner.
Yeah, no, this is one where I'm right there with you. He called plays for the Jets a couple of years ago. Not a great system for anybody, especially with the quarterback that he was calling plays for back then. The big reason that I will say that I think Kyler stays in 2026, despite me very much thinking that they were going to move on, is Mike Lafleur called plays for a quarterback where it clearly didn't work out several years ago, and I don't think that he's going to want to go down that road again. So yeah. Everybody would agree that Kyler's not a top 3, top 5, top 7, top really 10 quarterback at this point, but there's a floor with Kyler that you will not get with other potential players that you could bring in 2026. I would not want the Cardinals and their fan base to sit through 17 games of Jacoby Brissett if preventable, which it is preventable. So I'm right there with you. The biggest thing that, look, there was a lot of Twitter rumors regularly floating around about how this could happen, that could happen. And there was a point where they talked about the Cardinals interviewed, or at least called him to get his thoughts on things in Ron Rivera. And if they would have hired Ron Rivera in this division, look, I'm just glad that they're going with a younger coach, that they're at least something that we can, hopefully build off of, hopefully we can, latch onto over the next couple of years. But the reality is whether it's Mike LaFleur, whoever, you are fighting an uphill battle no matter what, because of the division you're in. And that is unfortunate. This is one of the toughest jobs to walk into over the past couple of years, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because of everything that we just talked about. I mean, this division is insane, and the coaches are not going anywhere. Good luck. But I'd give it a B.
Fair enough. All right, I'm going to let you keep rolling. I'm going to hit the tennis racket, hit the shot right back to you here with the Ravens into the AFC now, landing Jesse Minter. What do you think?
I love it. I love the Jesse Minter hire. You're naturally going to get a lot of comparisons to Mike McDonald with the fact that he's been under the Harbaughs over the past couple of years, a defensive-minded coach. I will say that I don't think you're going to have a lot of communication issues with Jesse Minter as the team's head coach that you had with Zach Orr as the team's defensive coordinator, which I think is a big one. I also really like the Declan Doyle hire as the offensive coordinator. I'll get more into that in a minute, but specifically pertaining to the Ravens defense, there were a lot of times early on last year where Malachi Starks, their 2025 first round pick, looked entirely out of position. And he looked like he had no idea, if he didn't look like he belonged on an NFL field at times. That changed about midway through the year. I don't think you're going to have those communication issues. And as somebody that, has lived in the state of Maryland for, my entire life, I really think you're going to see Ravens, like the old Ravens defense, come back more. And this is a hire that I am very much excited about. And like we said, the biggest thing with the Ravens defense over the past couple of years has been collapses. One of the biggest ones was the week 1 collapse against the Bills last year, in which you lose 41-40. And I mean, that was kind of the story of their season. But no, I love this hire. Declan Doyle, I like this hire for what it is. And he was, he was under Ben Johnson in 2025. I I can't wait to see where the Ravens offense goes. And I think that there is a better chance than people probably realize that the Ravens might draft Mekhi Lemon out of USC in the first round if he falls to him, which is a pick that I want to manifest. Like I've been talking about it. I hope Mekhi Lemon falls to them at pick 14. That would be a player that I think would be a great fit to be able to have another great receiver on the offense, especially with the pending Isaiah Likely free agency, him probably leaving. Anyway, to go back to this, Jesse Minter, one of the few A-plus hires. I love it all the way around.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, first things first, couple super chats. Robert, thank you. He chimed in early. We will get to your Raiders, my friend. I think they're the last team on the list. But thank you. And then Brandon points out that as we were talking, it seems the Cards hired Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator. You know, Hackett's obviously had his struggles, but it doesn't really matter. Mike Lafleur is the offensive coordinator there. That's my key concern there. So I'm not too worried about it. I'll allude back to Garrett's point of taking a guy who's had play calling duties and kind of push him down the pecking order a little bit. It's hard to cause too much damage there, but yeah, I totally agree with you on the Ravens. I'm a stubborn guy, and I kind of reserve those A-plus hires for like the offensive Ben Johnsons and that kind of stuff, just to like truly hold that place for like the absolute creme de la creme. But I did give this an A. I mean, outside of that point right there, where I do just think long-term over time, the offensive coordinators are going to give you a slightly, slight edge. If you're going to be losing good offensive minds, Declan Doyle, for example, if he's great, you're going to run the risk of him getting hired elsewhere. You come back to square one. You need another good play caller in this offensive league. But outside of that, I mean, Jesse Minter was one of the top candidates this cycle, if not the top candidate, to be honest, because we saw Chris Shula's defense struggle a little bit more through the playoffs. Jesse Minter did all he could in that Chargers first playoff game. And Justin Herbert said, you know what, Jesse, you can go F yourself, because I'm going to be Justin Herbert in the playoffs right now. Anyway, different conversation for a different day. Jesse Minter, what he's done with a rather, man, it's hard to say talentless defense in LA. There's some pieces there, but man, they got a top 10 defense both years with Jesse Minter with a bottom 10 roster, in my opinion. And that is incredible. So the job he's going to be able to do here, running that same scheme that the Ravens lost out the door when Mike, well, they ran the same scheme, but they lost the guy in Mike McDonald. It didn't really make sense 2 years ago. It would have been incredibly bold and criticized probably if they fired Harbaugh then to keep McDonald then. This is as close as you can come to getting an opportunity to kind of to right your wrongs, if you will. Again, it would have been crazy for them to make that decision back then, but this is as close as you can to kind of reeling that back in. I love landing Anthony Weaver as well, who was with McDonald and all a part of this tree. Mentioned him earlier. To be able to bring him in for Weaver, knowing that he does have head coach aspirations. Now, people are going to hold against him. Was it you or was it Jesse Minter? Whereas if he goes to the Giants and has success, it would clearly have been Anthony Weaver's success. So to be able to reel him in despite that is incredible. And I really do like Anthony Weaver, especially as like a left hand or right hand man to a Jesse Minter. We'll see who ends up like calling plays and that kind of stuff. I don't think who the exact play caller is on defense is quite as prominent as it is with like the offensive play caller. So it's more of a game planning thing with Jesse Minter setting all that stuff, and then Anthony Weaver pushing the buttons a little bit more. But yeah, sometimes the cards just align for you. And this reminds me a lot of when the Texans in a tough spot were able to land DeMeco Ryans, who was a great candidate, really had no business taking the Texans job. It was very lowly perceived for those that remember a lot of the criticisms of their ownership and the losing seasons post Deshaun Watson, David Coley getting that job. It's like nobody wants to be the Texans head coach, but DeMeco Ryans kind of falls in their lap because he had played for the Texans and there was that kind of legacy attachment there. It reminds me of Mike Vrabel landing in the Patriots this year where, he's got a connection there. The strong ties to Jesse Minter, who came up in this system to be one of the top candidates to land here at this time. Sometimes timing with these coaching hires is everything. And that really is what lands this as an A grade for me. Just some quick thoughts on Declan Doyle. He's a total wild card. I like it. I like the process. These seem to be the types of hires that can really hit a home run. Again, if he's good, you run the risk of losing him pretty quick here, but pretty crazy. He's 29 years old. He turns 30 in a month. Not so fun fact. He's the son of Chris Doyle, who was the the strength and conditioning coach at Iowa that was dismissed for some pretty bad stuff. You can look into it if you want. You can't help who your father is, but it's kind of a redemption opportunity for the Doyle family, I suppose. And I'm just really excited to see Lamar inside this offense and to see what Declan Doyle kind of puts all together here. He's got the Sean Payton and Ben Johnson background. I think there's a lot of potential for QB designed runs. We've seen a lot of that kind of in New Orleans with Taysom Hill, and a sampling of read option stuff with Bo Nix and Caleb Williams. So I think it's got the potential to tap into Lamar's mobility but also lifting up the passing game, scheming things up over the middle of the field, especially where Lamar thrives. I'm excited to see what this kind of playbook looks under Declan Doyle. So yeah, this is an A hire for me. Really excited for Ravens fans. Really excited that they pulled the trigger because the timing was perfect. And there's a chance if they did this next year, Jesse Minter is the head coach of the Steelers or something, and you're sitting there without as good of a candidate. So really, really like this. I just want a quick plug for some stuff on my channel here. I want to remind you guys, my Studs and Duds series has made the move to exclusive content. So if you sign up to memberships or Patreon, that link is in the description below. You can get access to that. You can get access to my draft write-ups. I know Garrett and I have been texting pretty much every hour about the favorite prospects we're watching. So draft season is here, baby. Times are exciting. And also another fun plug here. I have a Discord server. If you guys want to join, get in on some football conversations. I'm trying to send the link in the chat right now. There we go. It just
I'm about to join.
All right. Yeah. Garrett's going to hop in there. So, I haven't done a very good job promoting my Discord server over the years. So I just want to remind you guys, there's another opportunity to pop in, have some conversations. And it's been a good time in there. So that's all I got for plugs. Next up, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers staying in the AFC North here. Mike McCarthy is a head coach in the NFL again. How about that? I could not believe this, honestly, man. Like, my dad texted me. Obviously, he raised me, Packers fan, so he's got some thoughts on Mike McCarthy. He texted me, and he only texts me about like the biggest NFL news, like Shedeur falling in the draft, or the big headliners. This to my dad was one of those big headliners. And just crazy, man. A third to go at this. I didn't go back and look and put down in my notes like how many third-time head coaches there's even been in the NFL in a different regime. I do think it took kind of a unique circumstance here for a team to make the decision that we're going to give Mike McCarthy into his 60s a head coaching job here. And look, when I did my coaching carousel show a few weeks ago and I ranked candidates, I had different tiers. The very bottom tier was hard pass, I think. And Mike McCarthy stood alone in that tier. So I'm obviously not super fond on the idea of hiring Mike McCarthy in a vacuum, but sometimes different fits make more sense for different guys. And I can at least understand how you arrive at Mike McCarthy. I'll build up to my grade here as I talk. But like, in the back of my mind, I just wonder, thinking back on Mike McCarthy being in Dallas, kind of a yes man for Jerry Jones, like he's going to kind of do what is asked of him in terms of organizational structure and stepping up and stepping down at the right time. I do kind of wonder if this is a wink hire, and there's been some conversations with Mike Tomlin where it's like, Mike, your job for the next 2 years is to run a good program, steer the ship. We know you can do that. You've won a lot of games in the NFL. You're a very high floor hire in that sense. You know how to run a program. Second, do the one thing that you kind of do bring to the table, and that is get us a quarterback, whether it's through the draft, a free agent, whatever it might be. McCarthy does have a pretty good track record with that kind of thing. I'll give him that. So if the plan here is 2-3 years of Mike McCarthy, whether it's bringing in Malik Willis or drafting Ty Simpson, whatever their decision is, if the plan here is Mike's going to set us up with a different window than we had with Mike Tomlin, which Mike Tomlin's big deficiency was they were always good enough and they were never in a position to get that quarterback. If Mike McCarthy can do that for them, and then Mike Tomlin steps back in here because he's still under contract, and it kind of sounds like when Mike Tomlin stepped away, it was an emotional scene. He was like, I can't imagine coaching anybody other than you guys. I can see it. I can see him just coming back when things make more sense for Mike Tomlin here. So if that is the plan, I can be convinced of Mike McCarthy here. And I also want to say that the Patrick Graham hire is awesome. I've always liked Patrick Graham. He's had nothing to work with the Raiders. I can't stress that enough. It's just been, especially as Max Crosby's been kind of banged up over the last couple of years, it's just, there's just only so much a defensive coordinator can do. It reminds me of like Ejiro Evero with the Panthers. Like I like Evero, but like he's had nothing to work with in Carolina. And there's a reason the Panthers have held on to him despite their defenses not being very good the last 2 years. There's a reason the Raiders, kind of gave him another opportunity under another head coach there because they know his talents. There's a reason he keeps getting these jobs. He did a great job with the Giants years ago. I like Patrick Graham, and I think his system fits perfectly with what Pittsburgh wants to do. I think he can actually bring you better defensive coaching than what we've seen the last couple of years, where Mike Tomlin's had a lot on his plate. I think with Terrell Austin, there's been a lot of miscommunications and just a stagnant defensive plan. You're going to mix things up here with some of the same core principles of a Pittsburgh Blitzburg defense, if you will. And I really am excited to see Patrick Graham go from the Raiders roster to now the Steelers roster. And if you get back to elite defense in Pittsburgh, Mike McCarthy doing some decent things with the offense, this can look, like this is heading in the right direction. It's hard to be over the moon with this hire, but I actually landed on a B- with this one. I get it is kind of what I will say. I would have been more excited if they landed Chris Shula or Brian Flores, someone that I see as a potential top 10 head coach in the league someday, but B- here.
I'm glad they didn't hire Brian Flores, by the way. He's more of a defensive coordinator. They need to stay there for at least a couple more years. He's good where he is. He can
another 2 decades of Brian Flores.
Yeah, that's great. He's making more than $6 million a year now. He's well taken care of, highest paid DC. He's good. But regarding this, I think there's 2 ways you can look at it. You pointed it out. If you want to say, hey, we have a high floor with Mike McCarthy, I mean, the where the Steelers draft every year is a problem because they're not going to be in the top 2, top 3, top 5, hell, top 10 to go get a quarterback in any class, even if it's a loaded quarterback class. They're really not in a position to. And the one year they did was Kenny Pickett. That obviously didn't work out. So I think there's a part of this to say, hey, how is this going to be any different than what we've had over the past couple of years? How is this, are we going to finally win a playoff game for the first time in now 10 years? I think that part's valid. The biggest question that I have for this hire is specifically that, like, what is the team's future? TJ Watt's going to be 32 years old. Cam Hayward, is he going to retire? Then there's a lot more questions about the future of Jalen Ramsey. There's a lot of questions. Quarterback's the biggest one. I would think right now that Malik Willis will be their guy in 2026, but I have more questions with the overall roster at this point, whether the head coach was Mike McCarthy, whether the head coach was, like you said, Chris Shula, Brian Flores. I have more questions with where the direction of the roster is headed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I gave this a B. I will say Mike McCarthy, he's a Super Bowl champion head coach. So, and people that have succeeded after Mike McCarthy have not been Super Bowl champion head coaches. So that's good for Mike McCarthy to have that Super Bowl champion pedigree.
Yeah, like him and Harbaugh, it's like, okay, it was 2 decades ago at this point, basically. I get what you're alluding to there, but all right, let's stay in
maybe
the
he's
AFC
the reason. Maybe he's the reason that they won.
Maybe he is. Yep. Nothing to do with a certain Hall of Fame quarterback that he got to play with, and the one year they had a good defense.
Yeah, I mean,
Things
that guy's
lining up.
also 1-4 in NFC Championship games. So, and he's 0-2 without McCarthy in NFC Championship games. So, I mean, he's literally winless without him. So,
All right, you're getting me all mad now.
I'm just pointing the fact. He is defeated without him. So, Mike McCarthy, you know what? A+.
Yeah. And how does Cowboys look under Mike McCarthy in the playoffs? Do they have the same problems where they show up flat in the first week of the playoffs every year?
They didn't get to the NFC Championship game, but
Yep.
That's why you blame Jerry. Jerry's the scapegoat.
yeah. It's all Jerry's. There
you go. That's sports media right there. Todd Monken. This is, let me, again, I go back to the roster with what I just said with the Steelers. Guys, what is the vision with this team? And the one thing that I will say on behalf of Browns fans, I actually pointed this out in a video recently, and somebody left, there was like a 2 or 3 paragraph message like, hey man, thank you for pointing this out, instead of just being like the same talking pundits of the media that just say Deshaun Watson and then don't elaborate on anything. The way the Browns have pushed that contract down the road is they just take like a fraction of the pie and then just continuously kick it down the road. So it's really not that big of an impact on their cap year over year. So the Browns are not a good team strictly because of the Deshaun contract. There's been a lot of other decisions, specifically like we mentioned earlier, along the offensive line. And that is the biggest question that I have for Todd Monken in year one. Honestly, I think he's a fine play caller. I think he's a fine coach. Specifically, I gave this grade a B-, and I think that there is potential with Todd Monken to be the guy if they let it go for a couple of years. If you were expecting him to come in, raise the floor, have this team be 9-8 and competing with the Steelers or Ravens or the Bengals, any of the 3 next year, then I don't think that is feasible with the 2026 Browns roster, at least with where it is projected to be. There are countless questions along the Browns offense that I don't know if you're going to be able to address every single one of those questions in one offseason. So for me with Todd Monken, this is a hire that, look, I think he's a good coach. I think he's a guy that deserves an opportunity. I am a little disappointed for Todd Monken that this is the first opportunity that he's had to be a head coach. That, here we are.
Out of time though.
That's exactly it. With how old he is. The one thing that I will say is it's not like he's, like Pete Carroll, 73 getting a job for the first time. So I still think that there is a 5-year runway for him if you are patient enough to let things work out. The biggest red flag that I see or fork in the road is that Jimmy Haslam will not let this play out, and that that there's a scenario where we see this team be 9-25, 10-24 over the next 2 years, simply because of how depleted the offensive talent is on this roster. But specifically with this coaching or with this hire, I gave it a B-, and I think that there is potential there. We just got to be patient.
Yeah, I was actually really pleasantly surprised when this news came over my feed, because I was down in Dallas for the Shrine Bowl. Fortunately, I was at least able to get to that with all this damn weather. And we were just joking about who was going to end up as the Browns head coach. Is David Culley going to come back out of retirement? Who wants this job where you are so easily set up to fail, where they're kind of still in this transition window? I agree with what you said about the Watson contract. There's still a lot of money to get clean off the books there, but just with the state of the roster, they don't have a quarterback. The offensive line's a disaster. The entire offensive roster outside of running back and tight end needs players. They need guys that can start and be there. And then you also have Myles Garrett, just won Defense Player of the Year, obviously, but how old is Myles Garrett? That timeline doesn't really make sense, and he's not going anywhere. He's 30 years old. He just turned 30. So it's just what happens if you finally fix this thing, and then all of a sudden Myles Garrett's 32 years old and the defense isn't as good? It's just there's just a lot going on, not to mention the ownership, and Shador is there. There's just so much shit in Cleveland right now. But I did think Todd Monken was a legitimate candidate. I think he was in the top 7 or so of my list that I made before all these hires. And for the Browns, who I thought were going to land on kind of a laughing stock hire or just promote Jim Schwartz just to kind of get through this window that I just described, for them to actually get a guy that I was I like Todd Monken. I'm excited to see him as a head coach in the NFL. I think he's a really good offensive mind. I think he has the right leadership characteristics to be a head coach. Love that little clip that we got with him and Shedeur. We'll see what happens there. I mean, I'd be pretty surprised if Shedeur is nice. The gold wire. I'd be pretty surprised if Shedeur is the day one starter for them. But maybe 20% chance that's the case. We'll see. There's a long offseason to play out here. But honestly, this was like, how can I word this? This was in a vacuum. My first immediate, response is like, that's a good B hire, kind of like Mike Lafleur. Like, process makes sense. I like the candidate. We'll see what happens with this Jim Schwartz situation. I think if they soothe tensions, I think Schwartz is a little pissed that he didn't get the job. I think he is, that's fair, I guess. But it might still make the most sense for him to kind of swallow his ego and step back and still run this defense at a super high level. Jim Schwartz, you had your chance a long time ago. You were a head coach for a long time. Like, relax, bro. But I think if they lose Schwartz because of this, because they kind of, gave him, Fox interviews, phony interviews, and never really intended to hire him and all that, that makes me feel a little worse about this. I think Jim Schwartz is really good for that defense. They've got it all figured out. So that's kind of a sliding scale. If Schwartz is back, I would give this a B plus. If Schwartz is gone, we'll see what they land with after that, but it's probably more like a B minus for me. But I did write down, adjusted to Browns inflation, this is an A plus. Like, my genuine expectations as the Browns were like, what are we getting here? Like Matt Nagy as the head coach, like who the hell wants this job? And you got a legitimate real candidate. It actually reminds me, he's a much older guy, but in Monken, but it actually reminds me a lot of when Kellen Moore got the Saints job last year and Clint Kubiak this year with the Raiders, where it's like, I don't really know why they picked that job, but hey, good for the team. They got like a pretty good candidate. So it's a B plus if they keep Schwartz, and B to a B minus, depending on what happens if that's not the case. Oh, the watch. I love the watch. Is that real? That's not real gold, is it?
You can believe whatever. You can, what is, let me give like some politic answer without answering. Whatever your heart desires, whatever you choose to believe. Hypothetically. I mean, whatever. It's, you can believe whatever you want to believe.
All right, cool guy. Okay, the Miami Dolphins hire Jeff Hafley. You took the lead on the Browns right?
This is yours. This is your guy, former Packer. Actually, you take the floor.
All right. Also, Charlie, thanks for signing up as a member of the channel just now. Enjoy Studs and Duds, my friend. I like this hire. It just all kind of lines up for me. It all makes sense. I had Jeff Hafley, I think, fourth on my list of coaching candidates. Dolphins certainly weren't that high in terms of favorable positions to take. So if you're slotting things in, I think they were probably the 7th or 8th spot on my list for most desirable landing spots. And you get the 4th best head coach. So I like that just from if value exists in the coaching market. I think Jeff Hafley was a really good candidate. Watching him closely as a Packers fan, you could just tell from his opening press conferences, love that we have him, but damn it, he's going to be gone in a year. Cause you could just tell he came straight from Boston College, hated the recruiting disadvantages he had at Boston College, hated that he knew he could do a lot more than he was able to do with the talent he had relative to what he was competing against at Boston College, wanted this NFL job and absolutely killed it. I mean, honestly, the job he did in his first year was outstanding, even better than I think what he did in the second year, because they didn't have Micah Parsons in the first year and they still finished the year around a top 10 defense. They gave the Eagles an absolute run for their money in that playoff game last year. People forget about that because the offense was absolutely decimated by injuries. They couldn't move the ball against that Vic Fangio elite defense, but they did as good of a job against that Eagles offense and Saquon Barkley and AJ Brown as anybody. And they had Jalen Hurts in hell. Jalen Hurts is very lucky that he was able to escape that game with a victory. But you look at year 2 and things were really good. I mean, the creative things he was doing with Micah Parsons, if you're able to give him an impact pass rusher, that he took that step from, all right, I can take an average defensive roster and get a very good defense out of it. This year, before the Micah Parsons injury, he showed I can take a lot of talent and a premium player in Micah Parsons. I can get us an elite defense. They were one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in the league until Parsons went down. And then, it wasn't just that. They had a lot of injuries to deal with. And they were still a very good unit down the stretch. Some more ups and downs. Really bad cornerback room in Green Bay. But anyway, the job Jeff Hafley did was really good. He has clear head coaching experience and leadership characteristics. And I think Bobby Slowick is a very savvy offensive coordinator hire to bring in here. I think some of the fear might have been that he's going to bring all Green Bay guys with him. And he certainly brought his share of Green Bay guys with him, but it would have been so easy for Jeff Hafley to pluck like Adam Stenavich, or maybe he made a play for Sean Mannion, who ended up with the Eagles job, or something like that. Someone that doesn't have play calling experience, that honestly would have been a little bit more lukewarm on, someone like that running their offense. But Bobby Slowick, really a savvy hire to understand kind of the chaos of the league, understand what's going on with other teams, and to see Slowick, who in hindsight did a great job with CJ Stroud, who ain't looking so hot right now, painted beautiful pictures for CJ Stroud in terms of play action, helping an offensive line that did have talent struggles with play action. Bobby Slowick absolutely deserves another crack at this. So I think that's a really good hire. Sean Dugan's going to be his right-hand man, as he's been. Dugan was with him at Boston College, was an assistant coach in Green Bay. So I don't have a lot of negative things to say about this. I don't think Jeff Hafley was a Jesse Minter level candidate. He is a defensive-minded head coach. So if we're poking some holes in it, it's like, yeah, you could technically do a little more to grade out better. But I gave this an A-. I can absolutely see them building something, and it just feels like a situation where they're gonna allow a little patience here to do things the right way here as well.
That's the biggest thing that I will hammer home with my point of this is I can get behind the vision of the hire. I can understand why they make this hire. You have to have a thorn in either Drake May or Josh Allen's side. Neither of those guys are going anywhere for maybe longer than Jeff Hafley is going to be the team's head coach. Who knows? I mean, they're not going anywhere for a long time. So the biggest thing with where this roster currently is there has to be a vision here to basically say, hey, if we go 5-12 next year, if we start out 2-9 and then win 3 of the final 6 games and finish 5-12 in very Dolphins fashion, if you will, we have to be willing to see this out and we have to give them a chance. I like the vision with this. The roster is, I would say, bottom 10 in the NFL right now at best. It's not a good roster right now. There's a couple of players here and there, but this is a very underwhelming roster overall. So with Jeff Hafley, you can't expect them to turn water into wine with the current roster that they have in front of them. And I know they have an offseason ahead of them, but there's the whole pending Tua situation. And it's going to be a couple of, at least the 26th season. The 26th season should honestly, in a lot of ways, be, I don't want to say completely erased, but we need to see, progress towards season's end with what our goals are for the vision of this hire long-term. But overall, I do like the hire of Jeff Hafley. I like the second chance, if you will, for Bobby Slowick, and I can get behind those hires. We need patience from Stephen Ross up top, and I think that he'll be willing to give patience, all things considered. This is truly the first time in the Dolphins era under Stephen Ross where they have fired both, or they've had the head coach and GM truly align. Usually it's one before the other, which is because Chris Greer was there for so many years. So this is something that I can. Hopefully, we just need to have patience with it. And I like it. I gave it a B, but we need to have the vision from the start, or the idea from the start. This is a multiple year process. This is not something that's going to get fixed overnight.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Okay. We've got the very fascinating Buffalo Bills decision to keep Joe Brady around. What was your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I'll say this. The one part that I like about this a lot is bringing in Jim Leonard. But I don't really like the fact that, hey, we go out and lose to the Broncos and our big change is to not only extend Brandon Beane, but also to promote him and take, throw caution to the wind that our MVP quarterback in the middle of his prime in a playoff game. And I know Josh had 4 turnovers, but we're we have our MVP quarterback throwing to Khalil Shakir, McCole Hardman, 32-year-old Brandon Cooks, and Curtis Samuel, and our solution is to promote our offensive coordinator. This is one where I don't like this. Is Joe Brady going to continue to call screens to Khalil Shakir next year? Is that going to be the big thing for the Bills this offseason? Because complaining about wide receivers to the GM was one of the dumbest things he's ever heard. This is more of a more from the top down situation that I don't like. And Joe Brady, I think, is going to be in some ways kind of like the punching bag if and when the Bills fall short next year. The saving grace from this is that Jim Leonhard is a defensive coordinator that has, he's a really, really good defensive play caller. I like the vision with that hire. And you did point this out on Twitter. I did see this where basically you said that maybe Jim Leonhard can have the opposing team not score 33 points in a playoff game, which that part is definitely fair. But this is not a hire that I'm a fan of. I gave it a C+. I'm not a Joe Brady guy. I hope it all works out, but I think there's a lot more dysfunction behind the scenes once you really start to peel back the curtain. And I think we saw that as the Bills season ended and everything that happened within the week after the Broncos loss.
I think the dysfunction from a top-down perspective is very fair to point out. And it feels like every couple of years we get a new ownership group that kind of emerges through the woodworks, and they just kind of show their whole ass. Like we had the Panthers for a little while, we had the Texans for a little while, it's been the Bengals for a long time. This time was like, man, I didn't realize the Bills were so dysfunctional. Like, interesting to see that. I think it's very fair to point that out. And the thing I wrote down, well, let me start with this. I go in the opposite direction on this. I love this move outside of the ownership stuff. So this is what I wrote down. I was like, if you just never showed me the press conference and they fired their general manager, as they should have wiped the slate clean with this, and just told me Joe Brady's now the head coach and they got Jim Leonhard as the defensive coordinator, I'm like, A+, dude. Like, holy, they pulled that off. Like, good for them. The tweet you're alluding to was, how do you, I think I said something along the lines of, how do you fire a head coach who's shown so much development? They've given up 33 points per game in their last 5 playoff losses. And they've given up 33.5 points per game in their last 5 playoff losses. And they only gave up 33 this year. How do you give up on that sort of progress? It just, I'm not a Sean McDermott fan. I think he is in the bottom third of defensive minded coordinators in the league. You know who hasn't hired Sean McDermott yet? Anybody. He is a Ron Rivera-esque entity, in my opinion, coming from that tree. He doesn't move the needle one bit for me. And the idea that, he came in, set a great culture, raised the floor just as Ron Rivera did. Funny to think back on it. He actually did that for Washington at first, and then it flamed out. You don't need that anymore. You have Josh Allen. The culture's fine. Like, it's more than fine. That's not what you need. You need schematic elevation. You need a coach that the players believe in. At the end of the day, you got to go to the office and look at Sean McDermott, and you're like, look, we're all great players. Like, we're getting better. Like, we have the talent, especially in the offense. And you look at that guy, and everybody knows that he's holding the team back. And that just weighs and weighs and weighs. He had to freaking go. He had to go. And I was not sure they were going to do it. And they did. And that to me is the biggest thing they could have done. And then, look, I think you made some good points about Joe Brady. A lot of screens this year. I'm curious to see if there's an evolution there. I do like Joe Brady as an offensive mind. I do. It wasn't the best year, but they were still a very good offense. They do a lot of creative stuff in the run game. I do wonder how much, like that Jags playoff game, I remember talking about this, like every third down, it was a screen. Every fourth down, it was a punt or a field goal. I do wonder how much of that comes back to having a defensive-minded head coach, a guy that says, we're going to take care of the football. We're going to put enough points on the board. This is our overall philosophy, and my defense will get us the game in the end. Worked in that Jags game barely, and they almost lost it because of some questionable clock management from Sean McDermott at the end of that, and not potentially letting that clock run. But lost my train of thought for a second. But Okay, yeah, Joe Brady. I'm curious now that he's calling the shots. Does he have a little more say to get the right receiver in here? Does he learn from a Keon Coleman type of mistake? It wasn't that long ago that Howie Roseman picked Jalen Reagor ahead of Justin Jefferson and then responded with A.J. Brown. Like, you can learn from your mistakes and not double down on that type of stuff. I believe in Joe Brady. I do. So I think if you went with, let's say they go Chris Shula, still, I mean, I would have loved the hire. Don't get me wrong. But look, I get people are down on Joe Brady right now. I think things are going to be just fine with that offense. He's going to be right in the mix to lose him again in the future. I like the idea of locking him in and seeing if you can recapture. Just a year ago, he was viewed as one of the prominent offensive-minded coaches in the league and a future star at head coach. I'm okay with locking him in. And then you said it, Jim Leonard. I would bet, maybe not my mortgage, but I would bet a substantial amount of money that he's going to be a better defensive coach than Sean McDermott. I think he's got a great background. He's a young, up and coming mind. He's going to bring fresh ideas to the table. Things were stagnant as all hell in that defense. And I'm excited. He's going to have to do a lot of, schematic changes. There's going to be some interesting scheme fits. They're going from more of a 4-man front to a, kind of a 5-man odd front type of scheme is kind of Jim Leonard's background. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I get the ownership stuff. I don't like to see that. Like, yeah. Seems like a guy that at the top doesn't really understand what's going on in his own building and doesn't know how to explain decisions and all that. But man, outside of GM and ownership, I love everything about this move. I actually gave it an A. Okay.
There's only just two things that I want to say. There was a lot of Bills fans because Western New York is there. It's a really, really like grounded place. People, I mean, it's a cool place to catch a game. People are awesome. It's a really cool place. It's a community. And there's a lot of Bills fans that came out like after that press conference that were like basically saying for years we've been saying thank goodness Pagula doesn't run the Bills like he does the Sabres, and then that was apparently like I don't pay attention to hockey, so I can name like 15 hockey players max, probably 10. So it's like there's apparently he runs the Sabres really bad, and then the one thing that I will say like regarding the Bills playoff win is. I don't hate taking points. That's an entirely separate conversation. But I mean, the Broncos didn't take points in the AFC Championship game. The Bears didn't take points in the divisional round against the Rams. Taking points at times, not a bad thing. I'm being serious. I'm being serious. Like there's times where I'm just I'm messing with you, but no, I'm being serious. Like there's times where taking points, like dude, like take them.
You're saying Sean McDermott's game plan was good? Is that kind of
That's let's not twist it too much. I'm saying like the Broncos up 7 points at home with a backup quarterback in the AFC Championship game. Take the points. Don't try to get up 14. Just take the 10 that you have right there. Go up 10 and play it safe. Ben Johnson, you can get a field goal. Sometimes play it safe. It's not the worst thing.
For sure.
It's different than like Todd Bowles 4th and 1 on the opposing 43. Let's punt him inside the 10. It's a little different than that, but you know what I mean? Like it's a little different than that. But
yeah, I just think Sean McDermott was closer to that than some of the situations you're describing. I think Sean McDermott was a little too extreme on the conservative.
No,
and then,
fair.
Yeah, you're pointing out definitely some more extremes on the aggressive for sure. There's a good middle ground to be found for sure.
Agree.
All right. Next up, we've got the Titans. Kind of a banger of a hire here down the list. This is one of my favorites. I give this an A straight up. I don't really have a whole lot of negative to say about this other than same qualifier that came with Jesse Minter about, the prospects of potentially losing Brian Daboll here sooner rather than later. I think that's coming down the pipeline, but when you have a year 2 quarterback in Cam Ward, you're almost not as worried about what happens 2 years from now or a year or two from now. You're more about like year 2 is important for these QBs. And to pair this with Brian Daboll, just to jump the gun a little bit, I don't think you could have picked a better coach to pair with him. But I mean, Robert Saleh, dude, like great defensive mind when he goes to the Jets. Jets things happened. And then he goes back to the Niners and did as good of a job as any defensive coordinator last year. Not a doubt in my mind, Robert Saleh's top 5-ish defensive mind in the league. I'd have to really lay it out, but I view him up there as one of those premium defensive minds. Just as I would with like D'Amico Ryans, for example. Love D'Amico Ryans. Again, top 3, top 5 mind. Robert Saleh is the guy that taught D'Amico Ryans, and I think does a very similar job schematically and elevating defenses and all that stuff. So you look in this division, who has to face D'Amico Ryans. I think you got your own version of that here in Robert Saleh. I love that he came out right away and said, I'm calling the plays, man. This is my defense. I'm hands-on. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to do what flipping Dan Quinn did and just went to the Commanders and stopped trying and just put all the, let the coordinators do everything. It's like, dude, we hired Dan Quinn to like call the defense. And then he just takes a step back and does nothing. It's like, why did you hire him to begin with? I love that Robert Saleh is bringing what he does best to the table. Like, cannot complain about that. And then they also brought in Carmen Brasillo, man. Like, that's incredible. I do think he's doing as good of a job as an offensive line coach as anybody in the league right now. If you look at his resume the last 5 years, for a Titans offensive line that really needs some good coaching. And I get it. They had Bill Callahan. He just didn't do a good job here, man. He didn't. They got him a lot better when he got fired, like the second half of the year. They just did. So to improve this offensive line, to get Cam Ward cooking with Brian Dable, who they had kind of an intimate relationship in the pre-draft process. Dable really wanted Cam Ward, but the Titans said no. He gets him anyway. Gonna be really fun to see here, man. And I'm excited. I think you've alluded to some draft fits. I think the Titans getting one of these edge rushers at the top of the draft, put them on there in that defensive line with Jeffrey Simmons maybe emerging last year as the best D tackle in the league, T'Vondre Sweat. You could really start cooking with gas here with Robert Saleh. Give some defensive support to Cam Ward. You got the offensive line, the play calling better. They got a lot of potential next year to be one of these kind of Patriots-esque. Maybe they don't go to the Super Bowl next year, but Commanders-esque, Patriots-esque teams that really are the breakthrough team next year.
No, I couldn't agree more. I love this hire. I also gave it an A. I love the hire of Robert Saleh. I get in the habit sometimes of calling him Bob Saleh, but no, Robert Saleh, incredible hire. Brian Dable, this is the perfect defensive-minded head coach, offensive coordinator that'll probably eventually get another chance at being a head coach. Cam Ward, the reality is there's probably not a lot of people outside of Nashville that sat down and said, hey, I'm going to watch a Titans game last year. Cam Ward, he has all the tools. He's a really, really good player. The numbers, I would honestly say, don't look at them. Look at the throws that Cam Ward made because the players that Cam Ward had to work with offensively last year were not great, especially once Calvin Ridley went down. And I cannot emphasize how much I love everything the Tennessee Titans are doing. And I said this on a stream, I think a couple days ago, that I'm like humbly begging Amy Adams-Strunk to just not get in the way and just let the football guys just let Mike Bergonzi, Robert Saleh, just let them cook, let them do what they need to do. If the Jets do not take Ruben Bain at number 2 overall, draft him, send the card in, Ruben Bain, Jeffrey Simmons, T'Vondre Sweat, or even David Bailey if Ruben Bain is gone by then. The Tennessee Titans' future in front of them, and even your boy Femi Oladejo in year 2, this foundation that they have in front of them, I'm really excited. Like this is the runway. It's like pulling back the slingshot, like ready to launch. I love everything the Titans have in front of them. This is for the first time, probably since Vrabel is associated with the team or the head coach, not including the final year. This is like the first time where I'm like, hey, they are doing something right. I'm all for this. I would probably say this is the first time since AJ Brown was traded that I'm legitimately excited about the Titans' future.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
It's 4 years.
Love the Femi Oladejo shout out. They are going, Robert Saleh and him are going to be 2 peas in a pod, man. There's going to be a lot of energy and trash talk coming out of those 2 guys' mouth. Saleh's just so fun, man. Like he literally just like jumps on the field. Like I don't know if he's gotten any penalties for like getting on the field when he's not supposed to, but
did you see the clip of him calling the fan?
No.
So there was a text message exchange like last season when the Titans they were going through it. I don't know what point, but basically they sent a text and it was when Callahan was still the coach and they were like, I'm not showing up to another game until Callahan's fired. This team effing sucks. Like the whole thing, right? Whatever. And then it was like it was like the Titans ticket guy was like just sending a text like, promotion, whatever, to the, I guess, out to all the season ticket holders or whatever. And so he called him. Robert Saleh like called him, and I guess whatever the guy's name was, we'll just say it was Joe. And he's like, yeah, Joe, like I'm looking forward, like to this team now that we have Robert Saleh. And the guy didn't know that Robert Saleh was calling him. He thought it was like Joe. He thought it was Joe, like the ticket guy. And he was like, do you know who like I'm talking to, or you're talking to? He's like, no, this is Robert Saleh. And then the Joe guy was like, he's like, yeah, I really like the hire. I think he's going to be good. Not great. I think it's good. And then Robert was like, oh man, like, I'm glad you think that. And he's like, no, I'm just being an honest guy. Like, I'm not, blowing smoke up anybody's ass. Like, I'm just an honest guy, but I like you. I think we're going to be good.
That's great. I got to see that. Send that to me.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And also I guess him and Liam Cohen have like beef too. Like I got to look further into
I did see that. Yeah. It was after.
So that'll be fun.
It was after
we got like coaches feuds in the NFL, man. Ben Johnson and Lafleur. We got Robert Saleh and Cohen. This is good stuff, man.
It was after the Titans the Jags 49ers game this past year, which I said it when we did the weekly preview that those teams literally never play each other. Jags 49ers. Yeah. That's I know they technically do once every 8 years, but that's a team where it just they just don't play each other.
All right, our last one here.
All right, Raiders hire Clint Kubiak. I love it. I gave it an A+. I love it. He's the oldest son of Gary Kubiak. He'll be 39 years old next year. This is also, by the way, with the stipulation they're obviously drafting Fernando Mendoza. And the biggest thing when I look at the vision of this team is look at what the Seahawks did this year offensively. Look what they did last offseason. They drafted Gray Zabel in the first round. And this is a really strong guard class, free agent wise. It's stronger than it's been over the past couple of years. I don't think that Tyler Linderbaum will leave the Ravens building, but for the Raiders, the window and kind of like the runway, like we just described with the Titans, it's there. You can bring in Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 pick. Alec Pierce may be a free agent. The Raiders obviously have a lot of cap space because they are not paying that many great players on their roster. So they're certainly going to have a lot of money to be able to pay somebody like Alec Pierce in free agency. And for the first time in a very, very long time, you look at the Raiders. They have a good young coach. They have a prospect young quarterback. By the way, plug, Marcus released a Fernando Mendoza video a couple days ago. Go watch. Definitely go check that out after you're done.
Thank you.
Got you. I love this vision that they have, that we can actually say, hey, instead of going with Derek Carr and who was the one hire, Rich Bisaccia and Josh McDaniels, whoever the last coach was before. There was somebody between Gruden and Josh McDaniels with Derek Carr, but I like
the Anthony Pierce or the Antonio Pierce.
Antonio Pierce. Yeah. I just like the fact that we finally have a vision with the Las Vegas Raiders rather than just trying to throw things at a wall and seeing what sticks. And this is why I gave it an A+. I think Clint Kubiak is a really good offensive mind. He's called plays in multiple on multiple teams before. You alluded to earlier in the stream about calling with the 2021 Vikings. That was one of the best years of Kirk Cousins' career. I think he had 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions that year. The 2021 Vikings, had they had a competent defensive coach, shout out Mike Zimmer, by the way, if they had a competent head coach, they probably would have won 11 or 12 games. They blew so many leads that year. Again, shout out Mike Zimmer. None of which were Clint Kubiak's fault. I absolutely love this hire. A+. Raiders fans could not be happier for you. Just win, baby. Chef's kiss. I'm happy for him.
Spark my memory a little bit, because
yes,
was Clint just not brought back because O'Connell was coming in? Was that the only reason? For some reason in my mind, I was thinking that Vikings fans weren't a huge fan of him, but that also probably could have been true because
I liked Clint.
I live in Minnesota, and I think the rules of being an NFL fan is if you live in an NFL state, you will hear people not like their team's offensive coordinator. It's just how it works. But good shout out there. I agree. I gave it an A. Again, I reserve the A+ for the elite, call it generational prospect. Like Ben Johnson was an A+ last year. I reserve it for that. But yeah, this is an A, which is as high as I will go outside of that. Really like them for all the reasons you stated. I like swinging big for, they could have easily just been like, you know what, we're we're going into a transition. We need maybe a transition coach. Let's give Sean McDermott a call and do that whole thing. But if the guy that, has a chance to be a great head coach and an offensive one specifically is willing to take the job, maybe because you got the number one pick and he likes the QB prospect or whatever the reason might be, go for it, man. I mean, you have to compete against the Chiefs, Herbert, and Harbaugh. You got to compete against them in the regular season, and the Denver Broncos, who are just in the AFC Championship, kind of similar to the Cardinals situation. It's like, swing big if you can. And it reminds me as well about Kellen Moore taking the Saints job last year, that I think we feel really good about that hire too. So yeah, not as much to say about this one. Curious to see who they land for defensive coordinator. I would not be surprised if it is Sean McDermott. We'll see. It's just a thought. Don't want to go too far down that path before anything happens. But the biggest winner out of this is Fernando Mendoza. If, let's say, they hire Sean McDermott and they draft Fernando Mendoza, I don't think it would have been terribly optimistic about that situation. But I think Kubiak, with what he showed in Seattle, I think the offensive line will be tremendously improved and could be the most improved unit in the league next year, with the scheme helping them out, guys getting back healthy, real coaching, unlike Pete Carroll's kids coaching the offensive line. Yeah. Good scheme fit, playing on time. Gotta love it. So I gave this one an A. All right, my friend, we did it. We did the thing. You're gonna say your goodbyes here, and I'll carry on the rest of the show here.
Yes, sir. Please like the stream, help Marcus out. Definitely subscribe if you're not already. Do all that. Help Marcus out.
Well, screw promoting my stuff. What do you got going?
Oh, I mean, I'm trying to help a brother out. No, I appreciate it. Football analysis, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I actually did create a new TikTok recently.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I'll be, putting a lot more content out on there, more short form, of course. But no, appreciate you having me, and a lot of great content to come. A lot of NFL draft content to come, which Marcus will have as well. But no, I appreciate you having me as always, and good to break it down.
Yeah, good to see you, man. We'll catch up.
Absolutely.
After the stream. All right, see ya.
Yep.
Okay, guys, we still got a little bit more of the show to go here. Thanks again to Garrett for doing head coaches. Now, I still want to go through all of the coordinator moves here. Let me just real quick. I forgot to create a little banner here. So let me just put this on the screen real quick. Make sure I don't have a classic typo in there. Remaining coordinator hires. All right. So we got, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 coordinators on my list. I'll try to keep an eye on the comments in case I do forget anybody. But I will say this off the cuff that I'm not going to hit on guys under the head coach, the Rams offensive coordinator, for example. I'm not going to really spend time on that because we know who's really calling the shots in that type of situation. So the first name I'm just going in the same order we went with before, where we're starting in the NFC North and working clockwise. Then we'll get to the AFC. So for the Lions, Drew Petzing, the first guy we're going to talk about here, was kind of a negative reaction when the Lions hired Drew Petzing that I saw on Twitter. I thought it was okay. If I'm giving grades here, this is a B for me. I think it's very solid. Drew Petzing did some good stuff, and I think in Arizona, and I think the offensive line that he got to work with held him back a lot in terms of having a consistent run game, the ability to get into a consistent drop back passing game. He gets a very bad reputation, but I don't think Drew Petzing is straight up bad at this. I don't. I think he's better than what they had in, what was it, Morton last year, whoever it was. I think he's very qualified for this. And I just don't think he's as bad as the people think he is, I guess is what I'm saying. There's some frustrations there, right? A lot of times it felt like he didn't quite know how to lean into Marvin Harrison and feature him as a part of the offense. Obviously his scheme was never a great fit with Kyler Murray, kind of the under center, more Shanahan, Stefanski background that Petzing comes from. There wasn't a ton to like cater to Kyler's skill set within that system, especially in the passing game. I will give Petzing credit. He did bring a lot of fun stuff to the table in the design run game. And I actually witnessed hand in hand, like in my deep dive prep, I think a year ago, I think it was watching the Cardinals offense and then the Browns offense, like right back to back. I actually noticed explicitly that the Browns of a couple weeks later were running some of the exact same schemes with, oh my God, the UCLA quarterback, DTR, Thompson Robinson or whatever. I almost called him Thompson Reuters. DTR was one of those Browns quarterbacks that had to play. I actually noticed Kevin Stefanski picking Drew Petzing's playbook and putting it into Cleveland. There's a connection there. But I do think Petzing did some really good creative stuff with the design QB run game. Now you got Jared Goff, so that's not going to really come into play here for the Lions, but I think it's a sound hire. I think the most exciting thing would have been to land Mike McDaniel, which certainly the Packers fan in me let out a sigh of relief when I saw it was Drew Petzing and not Mike McDaniel. I think there's something to be said. Maybe the Lions felt like they don't want to undergo what they went through this year, where they lose the offensive coordinator and then have to figure it out the next year. I think they like Petzing as a scheme fit, and I agree. I think Goff is going to be a great fit with Petzing and all that, but you're less likely to lose Drew Petzing to a head coaching job than Mike McDaniel, who almost certainly would have killed it and then gotten that job. But I also think if you're a Lions fan, you're like, well, who cares? Like we have this window. We're trying to win this Super Bowl. So like, I get that. If you're a Lions fan and you had a chance maybe to get Mike McDaniel and you go for Drew Petzing, it's a little bit less encouraging, but I just a little bit of hope there for Lions fans that I actually think this can work. I think Drew Petzing can do a good job here. I don't think he's a disaster in the way that a lot of people think. So I said B on that one for Drew Petzing. I did just get a super chat from Robert. I'm trying not to get too optimistic, but realistically, do you think the Clint Kubiak hire will work out? Every time I start getting my hopes up, it seems to backfire. Yeah, I mean, like I said, from a process perspective, you're putting yourself in a really good spot. I can't make any promises, but I really like the fit with him and Mendoza together. They still got a lot of work to do. Not every coaching hire works out, but I think there's as much reason to be optimistic, my friend, as you can, stomach, I guess, the optimism of being a Raiders fan and not trying to get your hopes up too high. Like, yeah, there's a chance, of course, things don't work out, but it's a very good hire. All right. In the NFC North, Jonathan Gannon to the Green Bay Packers. Had a lot of people coming up to me at the Shrine Bowl like, oh, did you see the news? Jonathan Gannon. Yeah, and people on Twitter as well, assuming I was going to be very upset as a Packers fan with Jonathan Gannon. Kind of to think back to what I said about the Ravens, like coaching hirings and the coaching cycle and the coaching carousel, a lot of it is just timing. And unfortunately, in the Packers case, this wasn't like last year where you had maybe a Dennis Allen out there to be hired, or when Vic Fangio was available for the Eagles. Like sometimes these really prominent defensive minds, I think in the Niners, when they were able to stick Robert Saleh, another great example, sometimes these really brilliant defensive minds that were head coaches that become available, sometimes they're available and some years they're not. And this year there was a lot of decent options, but Jonathan Gannon, Raheem Morris, Sean McDermott now, like nobody that was a Robert Saleh level DC or a Vic Fangio. Jonathan Gannon to me is a good defensive coordinator at the end of the day. When I think back to his time with the Eagles at the end of it all, it wasn't always perfect, as it isn't with Jonathan Gannon, but they went to the Super Bowl that year. The one thing Jonathan Gannon can do at a very high level is design blitzes. He is a perfect fit for the Packers in the sense that their blitz rates are nearly identical with what they've done with Jeff Hafley and what they did in Arizona, where they don't actually blitz at a high rate, but when they do blitz, you're getting very creative. You're trying to create phantom pressure, run stunts, confuse defenses, weaponize specific pass rushers. And Gannon didn't always have the pass rushers, right? But I think you saw some flashes this year, even getting Walter Nolan going and some better talent. Josh Sweat had a good year. I'm excited to see what Jonathan Gannon's going to do from a creative standpoint with Micah Parsons. I think you're going to get a lot of those same third downs that Jeff Hafley got a lot of credit for, where they're doing some exotic stuff and really flustering defenses. I think that Gannon has been very exotic in his system. He didn't just come in and do everything Vic Fangio style. He got creative where he could, and some of those earlier defenses with the Cardinals, they weren't good, but they had nothing to work with. And it was like he's putting together some competent game plans at times. So I think that this is like a B hire for the Packers. The beauty is if he is good, you're not going to lose him. I don't think anyone's going to be rushing to the table to hire Jonathan Gannon. I would have been a little bit more excited for Jim Leonard. I think the upside was a little bit better there. But the other thing I'll say about this in a positive light for the Packers is I was really afraid that the Packers were going to do what they always do, get a little bit cheap with the coaching staff, promote from within, and assume everything was just going to rise to the top. The Packers staff has been largely depleted over the last couple of years with not just Jeff Hafley this year, taking a couple of assistants with him there, but you also got to remember Anthony Campanelli, the Jags defensive coordinator. He was probably the next man up for Green Bay, and he left, and he almost got a head coaching job this year with the Arizona Cardinals, ironically. So I was really worried that the Packers were going to look internally at a guy like Derek Ansley, who did not do a good job with the secondary this year in Green Bay. And I think Ansley actually followed Hafley to Miami. I actually want to look that up real quick because that kind of gets me excited as a Packers fan. I just was not. I was terrified that they were going to pick this guy. Looks like the Dallas Cowboys hired him. Is that right? Wow. Okay, Derek Ansley. Keep an eye on that. He will be the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach for the Dallas Cowboys this year, not back with Green Bay. Big thumbs up to the Packers for that one. The reason I say that is he was the defensive coordinator in Brandon Staley's final year with the Chargers, where they all got fired. And then he comes to Green Bay as their pass game coordinator and their primary defensive backs coach. And we saw this secondary unable to find the football. I was kind of hoping they would fire him, and then I became afraid that they were going to promote him as the defensive coordinator. So they don't go with him. You also have DeMarcus Covington on that staff, who I think higher of. He's the D-line coach. He was the defensive coordinator under Gerard Mayo in New England last year. I think Covington would have been a decent promotion, but I believe that they were able to retain Covington. All of this is kind of playing out in real time because they just hired Gannon about a week ago. But I do think that he is staying, DeMarcus Covington, in Green Bay. And then they also went out and brought in Bobby Babich, who was the Bills defensive coordinator, to be their defensive backs coach. I'm cool with that. You're kind of knocking him down a peg, and I like his energy. So I like that you have, with Gannon, a couple of other guys that have kind of defensive coordinator experience also in that room. I actually really like the Packers defensive staff and how they've kind of landed post Jeff Hafley. I don't know that they'll be quite as good as Jeff Hafley, but I think they can be somewhat close, which is as good as you could have asked for. So solid B hiring on Jonathan Gannon. I think it's perfectly reasonable. And the system that Gannon runs is actually very similar to a lot of the stuff that Hafley was doing, who had shifted to more of a 3-4 style kind of defense anyway. Came from that more 4-2 Robert Saleh type of background beforehand. But let's go to the Eagles, who went with Sean Mannion. Speaking of Green Bay coaches, so Sean Mannion, I don't really have any opinions on it. And to be honest, when I saw that he got hired, I didn't even really process that he was the Packers quarterbacks coach this recent year. Maybe that's my own fault, but it was just kind of out of left field. It's like, okay, apparently not only is Sean Mannion no longer a backup in the NFL, but he's actually been a coach the last couple of years, and now he's the Eagles offensive coordinator. You know, the big story here was all of the guys that turned this job down, really not wanting to work for the combination of Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, dealing with the A.J. Brown situation. It's become a bit of a mess, and the young Sean Mannion is going to have to step in and do some good work here. he's just one of these hires where I don't know enough. Going to be very similar with David Blau and the Commanders up next. It's like, I'm always for the process of finding these up and coming, like usually backup quarterbacks. Same case with Sean Mannion, where they never had the talent to really rise to the level of a starter, but had to win with their mind where they could win, and came up in these kind of modern offenses and bring new ideas to the table and know what helped them as a backup quarterback, like, find some manufactured offense and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, call it a B, call it a TBD. The grade's almost irrelevant on Sean Mannion. He's just so entirely unproven. And we don't even know like what his scheme's going to look like either. Like, he's come from the Sean McVay background here. So maybe we see more under center play action type of stuff and a shift towards the Shanahan style system with Jalen Hurts and this type of stuff. And then we can evaluate if he can handle that better. We've seen mixed results getting outside of the spread style offense, or maybe Sean Mannion, who, he played at Oregon State, right? Like, I want to say his college background was more of a college spread, just kind of trying to remember watching him play. Because I would have, he came out in 2015. So a little bit before I started my channel in 2016. So that would have been a little bit before when I started watching him. He was actually a 3rd round pick in 2015. But yeah, Oregon State, I can't act like an expert on the Beavers offense from 2010 to 2014, but I know there was a lot of that kind of Mike Leach inspired spread them out style stuff going on in the pack back then. So I don't know. I'm probably not the biggest expert on that matter, but we'll see. We'll see what kind of offense this looks like. And then you have the Commanders inside the NFC East here. So David Blau, I mean, literally just copy and paste what I just said about Sean Mannion and apply it. I've voiced my criticisms of Dan Quinn in this show and kind of running Cliff Kingsbury out of the building. Now, that's very fascinating that Cliff didn't actually get a job. So the NFL kind of telling you that maybe Cliff's got a bit of an ego and he's not free of blame of everything that happened here between him and Dan Quinn that kind of led to this parting. But they very quickly hired David Blau internally there. Like I said, no idea what he wants to run or how good he's going to be at it and what this is going to look like. But the process, I think this is the process for a lot of these teams, is to kind of just roll the dice at upside with these types of coaches. So really a TBD/B on David Blau. I just don't know enough. We'll just have to evaluate as he comes in. And then they did hire Durante Jones as well as the defensive coordinator. Now, this all rubs me the wrong way because I talked about it earlier. Like, with Dan Quinn at this point, what is it that you do here, Dan? Because I get it. He's trying to raise the bar with the culture and that kind of stuff. But he was hired as a prominent defensive mind. And they're not running the same stuff they ran in Dallas. He passed the defense off last year to, who even was? I can't even remember who their DC was that they fired off the top of my head right now. A lot of names in today's show, but Dan Quinn's basically taking the CEO approach with this thing, and now he's bringing in Durante Jones, which is very fascinating. And I don't want to give the wrong idea here. I like this hire. I think it's very fascinating. But what I'm trying to say is this is a shit or get off the pot year for Dan Quinn. It's like, if you can't make the right hires, and you're making some pretty big swings here, going for a upstart 30-year-old backup QB, basically, to be your offensive coordinator in David Blau, who I vividly remember playing for the Lions just a few years ago. And then the Blauhards was the nickname for the fans of that experience. But Durante Jones also a little bit out there, because Durante Jones has been in Minnesota and has been kind of groomed under Brian Flores with the idea that the Vikings are probably going to lose Brian Flores at some point. Now it's leaning towards that's actually not going to happen. Good for the Vikings there, but Jones presumably is going to come in and run a Brian Flores defense, because that's really what he's been kind of groomed to do for his expected promotion as the Vikings defensive coordinator. So the Vikings lose their guy there, their backup plan. They're going to have to find someone else. But this is just, like I said, the offensive hire is aggressive. This is kind of an aggressive defensive hire too, because it's a diverse, complex system, and Brian Flores has a firm finger on the trigger of that defense. So can Durante Jones basically be Brian Flores? Like, that's a lot to ask. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. Maybe he can. Presumably he, is ready for this and would have been the Vikings guy if Flores did get the job. So I'm encouraged. And the nice thing about that approach defensively, as we've seen in Minnesota, is if you're going to be a team like Washington and you've got honestly dog shit talent like they do in Washington. I'm sorry. If you're a Commanders fan and you don't like me saying that, ourlads.com is all I have to say for you. Brian Flores, when he stepped into Minnesota with his scheme, the aggressive blitzing, the kind of min-maxed approach of like, we're either blitzing 6 or we're dropping 8. You don't know when we're doing what. And we're running all these amoeba defenses. We've got all these amoeba defenses where we're walking guys up to the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's coming, who's dropping into coverage, you name it. They took some pretty bad rosters in Minnesota and schemed up top 10 defenses. And if you're able to get that, that's awesome. So there's a lot of upside here, but there's also the downside of like, well, turns out Brian Flores is just an absolute evil genius. He knows what buttons to push at the right time. There is a line to be thread there, right? Like, you got to understand the limits of your aggressiveness and not just get torched all the time. So we will see. I like the Durante Jones approach even more than David Blau. I would actually say, B+, A- on the Durante Jones thing. I'm excited to see what he can do, but it's kind of a boom or bust hire at the same. And maybe the bust outcome here isn't the worst case scenario, because the Commanders are probably going to be in a transition year anyway, unless things go really right here. And then if things go bad with Durante Jones, you just clean the slate, right? Dan Quinn's out, Durante Jones out, David Blau's probably out. You approach year 3, or it'd actually be year 4 for Jaden Daniels at that point, with a chance to maybe refocus before it's too late, in a sense. So Commanders definitely making moves here. A lot of pressure on Dan Quinn coming out of this, though. Like, this is his last bullet in the chamber to get this thing right here, I think. Did just get a super chat from Moses. Might have missed it, but did you cover the Steelers offensive coordinator hire? They announced it right before you went live. Who was it? Because I didn't cover the Steelers offensive coordinator hire, and I do think that is a relevant question, because Mike McCarthy will be pretty hands-on, but McCarthy's kind of gone back and forth between calling plays and not calling plays. So I'll keep an eye on the chat. If you guys could just let me know who it is. I'm sure we'll get a response here in just a second. Maybe I'll have a quick sip of my Diet Dr. Pepper while I wait. Guys are slacking. You're either slacking or I'm delayed. Brian Angelico? Okay, I actually don't know who that is. I've seen the name, but I forget. All right, Brian Angelico. Let's see here. He is 53 years old. Been around. So, okay, most recently, that's why I've seen it. Passing game coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings the last 3 years. Goes back, looks like, with a bit of a Ron Rivera background for a little bit. He was with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay as the tight ends coach, 2016 to 2018. They found some decent tight ends in there with signing like that would have been Jared Cook year, 2016. So Packers, he's got a tight ends background. That'll be fun. A lot of interesting tight ends. So maybe he can get the most out of Pat Freiermuth and Washington in tandem with Mike McCarthy, kind of putting this thing together. I like that he's coming from, I like it because he's coming from the same overall system that Arthur Smith ran. So you don't have to like completely change everything, but you're getting a little bit more of a pass game background there between McCarthy and Angelico here. But yeah, like the wide zone Shanahan style offense, he's really learned that the last 4 years under Kevin O'Connell. So that seems like a pretty damn good hire, honestly. Like that's an impressive resume that I'm surprised that his name wasn't on the forefront of my mind a little bit. So I like it. Thumbs up. And thank you for asking. Monty, thank you for the super chat, my friends. Yeah, we can fast forward to Frank Reich just because you super chatted asking about it. Why not? Let's talk some Jets. The first thing I wrote down in my notes on the Jets here with Frank Reich, LMFAO. Like, what are we doing here? Can we just rip the Band-Aid off? Like, we know where this is going, man. Aaron Glenn, talk about Dan Quinn using all of his bullets in the chamber. Aaron Glenn had a full freaking magazine of opportunities here, and he has burned through the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, half of his assistants, everything. Like, he's out of lives at this point. He's Super Mario with no more mushrooms, and there's one more bar left on that sucker. Like, this thing is all but over for Aaron Glenn. And then your choice is Frank fucking Reich? What? Dude. I'm speechless that was what Aaron Glenn thought was what needed to be done here. Number one, like, why fire Tanner Engstrand? Given the quarterbacks he had to work with, you only have Garrett Wilson, and he was hurt for the whole year, basically. Like, if you liked Tanner Engstrand when you hired him the first time, what the hell changed? Because you gave him no opportunity to show you anything. The one talented unit they had was the offensive line, and the offensive line played well. So losing Tanner Engstrand alone made no sense. And then, dude, did you watch anything that happened with Frank Reich at the end of this thing? Like, the Colts, before and after, Frank Reich. Frank Reich's there the last year, stagnant offense. Matt Ryan, complete unmitigated disaster. I think that was the last year. A supremely talented offensive line fell completely. Like, they went from a top 5 offensive line to a bottom 5 offensive line like that. They rightfully fired Frank Reich. The Colts have been proved very justified in that decision. We've seen what Shane Steichen has been able to do with a lot of the same players. And then you look at Frank Reich's Panthers regime, if you can even call it that, it was like 11 weeks long, was right there. I mean, you might seriously be tying, outside of Urban Meyer, who's kind of the like end of the spectrum in terms of worst head coach hires ever. You might be tying Aaron Glenn and Frank Reich together here, who, at least in the last 10 years, outside of Urban Meyer, I think Frank Reich was the second worst head coaching hire with the Panthers. It was a lot of the same issues: stagnant offensive scheming, and an offensive line that had talent in Carolina that disappeared as soon as Frank Reich got there. It was good when Frank Reich arrived. He broke it. And then it was good again the next year when Frank Reich left. So I'm worried about the offensive line to begin with. I mean, the Jets have a lot of talent. This is very similar to like what the Panthers offensive line looked like when Frank Reich got there. So he's got to prove that he can put the right guys in place and help the offensive line. Was always what stood out the most to me about these Frank Reich teams at the end of it. But I never really viewed Frank as like this brilliant schemer either. Like, he has an offensive background. He's got the Andy Reid background. I think he knows a thing or two about offense, but is he a forward thinking, like, offensive minded guy at the forefront of innovation, like a Tanner Engstrand kind of is supposed to be, at least? Like, I just don't get it. But you might be tying together the second and third worst head coaches of the last decade here together. It's fascinating. And I tweeted it out. I will say it again. As soon as I can find the prop, Aaron Glenn, first head coach fired. He's a dead man walking, man. He is an absolute dead man walking. And if you're that front office and you listen to a word of, and this is another reason why he's probably going to fail, but he's created this problem for himself, Aaron Glenn. If you're Darren Muge and Aaron Glenn comes up with these extra first round picks you have, and he says, this guy fits my system really well. I want him in the first round. You smile and nod. And then when Aaron Glenn walks out the door, you just start laughing. Like, he thinks we're going to draft someone for him? Like, nah, man, you are a Gears of War meat shield for this organization right now. It's so bad, man. F. Frank Reich. Okay. The Cowboys hired Christian Parker. That's the next one I have here. Vic Fangio guy. I like poaching him interdivision, especially with these reports that Vic Fangio might be retiring. So, and if it doesn't happen this year, it's almost certainly going to happen soon. Like, he's getting up there. So if you kind of snuck in there and stole the guy that the Eagles were counting on making the next guy, kind of a savvy little interdivision move. I like that for the Cowboys. A lot to like in Christian Parker. Reminds me a lot of like a young Jonathan Gannon or Jero Evero, one of these Fangio disciples. He was originally with Vic in 2021 in Denver. So we know this is one of the metas of the NFL. And from a scheme perspective, I definitely think the Cowboys will be better off being more of an off-zone team. Savon Ravel was more of an off-zone corner coming out. You've got I think like Deron Bland, who they just re-upped heading into this last year. I like his kind of ball skills in an off-zone system. So I think it can work. I think, this is more like a B+ for me with Christian Parker. It really lines up. I like being able to steal him interdivision there. And that's really all I have to say about that one. I'm excited to see what he can do down there in Dallas with a decent D line and some pieces to work with. If he can elevate that defense, I think Dallas is in a position to surprise next year and maybe even go toe-to-toe with these Eagles that have, they're losing a defensive coach here. The offensive coordinator hire is fascinating to say the least. We'll see how that one lands. But yeah, I think the NFC East is going to be very fascinating next year. And then I did just get a super chat. Antonio, I saw your one earlier too, my friend. Thank you. I don't know. He says, how did Aaron Glenn survive this long? It's it really does remind me of Brian Callahan after last year's Titans season, where it was like, look, they swung for a guy. Everybody can tell that he's just not an NFL head coach. And I said it in the Jets deep dive. Like, I didn't even think Aaron Glenn was that great of a defensive coach to begin with. The whole idea was he was going to come in and like recreate the kneecap biting. And he's tried to do that, but it certainly hasn't reaped its results yet. All right. So we've got the Bucs hiring Zach Robinson. Not a big surprise. They are sticking within that Shanahan style family tree that Baker has. I think at this point you keep him within that system. He had his ups and downs this year, and Zach Robinson, young mind. I will give Zach Robinson some credit. Like, it wasn't always perfect with Atlanta, but I don't think he did a bad job necessarily, just not an amazing job. I thought it was really fun, some of the stuff he did to maximize his personnel, taking a tight end, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I should figure this out because it's worth recalling while we're here. It's coming to me now as I start clicking through the roster, but Charlie Warner. So they were like they were coming out in like 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, Bijan Robinson and Mooney and London, but really like taking Charlie Warner and putting him at running back and then Bijan out as a slot wide receiver. And then they were flexing in like Drake London and Kyle Pitts as like flex wide receiver tight ends. I mean, they're basically interchangeable when you flex those guys in like that. Drake London actually maybe is an even better blocker than Pitts, but they were doing some fun stuff like motioning Bijan into the backfield where he has this kind of unique lead blocker in Charlie Warner, who's the best blocker on the field, kind of tapping into Bijan that way. And then there was times too where like Charlie Warner, it's just a fun wrinkle because number one, it kind of forces the opponent to come out in base defense because you're out in heavy personnel. And number two, it allows you to take your best pass blocker and flip that with Bijan, basically, because like you need the extra pass blocker in the backfield, but Bijan's like your best playmaker. So why waste Bijan in the backfield when he's got a pass block? It's a creative answer to that problem. So I thought that was really cool, and it worked for a while, and then it felt like they kind of got away from it. So I don't know. He deserves some credit for some innovation there, but I think it's a very sound hire. There's another like B plus hire. I don't think he's an amazing offensive coordinator or anything like that, but I do think a change, moving on from Grizzard, making a change is a justified move there. So that one's fun. And then the 49ers land Raheem Morris, and he is like best friends with Kyle Shanahan. So that made sense that they were going to go that route. This is fascinating. The Niners forever have really been in that Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans scheme, which is, it's that wide 9 4-man front. It's a lot of quarters, quarter match, running press when appropriate. Raheem Morris, though he's got a lot of these connections to a Shanahan and McVay, and that he's kind of within that family of coaches, he runs a very different system. And it does make me think back a little bit to when the Niners branched out of the coaches that really run that Robert Saleh inspired defense, and they hired Steve Wilks, who is more of a 3-4 background kind of guy. Raheem Morris, going back to his time with the Rams, and then him kind of being the overseer of his defense in Atlanta, while he had other defensive coordinators pushing the buttons and that kind of stuff, it's very clear that they were running Raheem Morris's defense, right? Especially when you see, we saw the literal inverse of this last year, where someone within that 49ers coaching tree comes in Jeff Ulbrich, and the Falcons didn't change their system at all. They continued to run a 3-4 system that likes to drop their edges into coverage, that runs a lot of off zone, different types of, zone blitz looks and that kind of stuff. That's what Raheem Morris likes to run. And that's kind of what Steve Wilks ran when he came in with the Niners. And it wasn't a fit, that scheme clash. And you have Chris Kachurik, who's a big, prominent mind in that Niners room as well. So I'm curious if they learned some lessons there, and if Raheem Morris is going to be a little bit more moldable to kind of let Chris Kachurik design the same fronts that work. There's a chance the scheme changes, and I don't know if that's the best outcome for the Niners, but I do think Raheem Morris is a highly qualified defensive coordinator. I look at him kind of similar to Jonathan Gannon, where it's not always perfect, but he's clearly good. He's one of the 32 best defensive minds in the league. He should be a defensive coordinator in the league. So I think this is fine. I think if I were a Niners fan, I would have loved to see like Jim Schwartz maybe be a better fit in terms of the scheme fit. But, there's some, I could see some areas where this doesn't work out, because we just saw this a couple years ago with a very similar experience with Steve Wilks, but I'm not necessarily going to bet against it either. I think this lands as like a B hire for me for the Niners getting Raheem Morris. All right. We talked about the Jets. I did want to at least shout out the Jaguars getting to keep the band together. They had 2 guys getting head coach interviews, and for a while it felt like Grant Udinsky, who's one of these very prominent rising minds, for a while it felt like maybe the Browns were going to land him or something like that. And then it felt like the Anthony Campanelli might take the Cardinals job. So like for the Jags to be able to keep those guys, getting Travis Hunter back next year, putting the band back together, if you will, I think that's at least worth noting. Like the Jags were big winners from this hiring cycle. So just wanted to note that. I did get a super chat here from Clement. Who should my Seahawks hire to replace Kubiak? We almost hired Kafka a year or 2 ago. Would be open to it, but what's your thoughts? Kafka doesn't really come from that Shanahan background. I think pretty clearly Darnold now, between Kevin O'Connell and now Clint Kubiak, like you don't break what what ain't broken, or you don't try to fix what's not broken. Like, you stay within that coaching tree. So who would that guy be? Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think. There might be someone internally that makes sense for sure. I don't dare whisper the name Shane Waldron. I'm trying to think. It's funny because actually flipping Drew Petzing's name came to my mind, and I was like, wait, no, he got hired. The guy the Steelers just hired, honestly, would have been a great fit with his connection with Sam Darnold. That would have made a ton of sense, but he's gone. Is there anybody else in Minnesota that, they've been kind of picked thin between Udinsky and the guy that just left, so probably not there. You got Mike Lafleur just got poached. I don't think Kyle would let Clay Kubiak leave, but maybe to replace his brother. Like, Clay Kubiak would make a lot of sense. It's kind of a tough conundrum there, man. Yeah, Bobby Slowick got poached. Zach Robinson got poached. Arthur Smith is a thought in the chat right now, but he took the Ohio State job, so I don't think that's going to happen. Someone said Jim Bob Cooter, but that's not really within that scheme. I'm trying to come up. Yeah, Shieldhouse. That's a good one. Yeah, maybe it's Shieldhouse. That's a good one. Coaster Hour nailed it. Yep. The Rams, Shieldhouse would make a ton of sense for the Seahawks. That's a great call out. I would bet that that's who it's going to be. And Shieldhouse, however you say that name. But yeah, thanks for the super chat. Monty as well. Shout out Monty. Monty says, very surprised and impressed by Peyton recognizing the need for freshness. Will be interesting to see about play calling. Hopefully it works out. And I'm assuming you're talking about promoting Davis Webb to offensive coordinator. I would assume is what you're talking about there. Davis Webb has a lot of respect around the league. Peyton's going to be very involved with everything, no matter what. So I'm pretty freaking optimistic about that promotion. With because he kicked his guy out of the building, right? He kicked is it Callahan? No, not Callahan. Can't think of. Oh, help me out, Monty. What's the name of the guy that they kicked out? Oh my God. This is driving me crazy. Joe Lombardi. Thank you. Yeah, Joe Lombardi's been with Sean Payton forever. So that was a very big kind of ego swallowing, smart move by Sean Payton to get a little younger there, get some fresh minds in there. Joe Lombardi's not really bringing much to the table there. So I do like it, even if obviously Sean Payton is still, largely calling all the shots there. But I would imagine that, Davis Webb is going to be, it's setting up. I'll say this. It's setting up next year. There's going to be some pretty good offensive minds next year. I really do think between Davis Webb, Brian Dable is going to be back in the mix. You've got, I think some bigger names next year, potentially creeping through the woodworks. Maybe Bobby Slowick has a good year, that kind of thing. But Zach Robinson is probably going to be a name with the Bucs. Like there's a lot of guys to keep an eye on for young offensive-minded coaches next year. You're going to have Grant Udinsky in Jacksonville, another year older. Like there's a lot. Okay. A couple more here. Chiefs have brought in Eric Bieniemy, brought him back rather. I like it. We talked about Matt Nagy earlier. Clearly, like, things weren't working the last couple of years. I felt like every week I was complaining about the Chiefs' kind of lack of identity, not really knowing where their own strengths are. And, moving on from Nagy and bringing in Eric Bieniemy, I think is smart. And I think, the job Bieniemy did with the running backs in Chicago, he's had his path, his interesting path, to trying to become a head coach in the league. And he hasn't been able to get that that final step in there. And when he was an offensive coordinator, it just wasn't great, like by himself, but we know it works with Bieniemy and Reed together. And I think they complement each other well, because I think Bieniemy's understanding of the run game and running backs and coaching his backs to play well within the system that his team runs. I mean, you can't say enough about the job he did with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monken. And that's the big thing with the Chiefs is like, can they develop at running back? Can they find some running backs and develop them and get the run game to be a more prominent part of what they do? And I think being more efficient down in the red zone, that was always, I feel like, where Bieniemy got the most praise, was those go gadget plays down in the red zone with misdirection and shovel passes and backwards passes and all this stuff. Like, feels like that hasn't been as prominent since Eric Bieniemy left. So I think it's a good move. I do. And then Chargers, our final team here, unless I'm forgetting anybody. Mike McDaniel. I mean, to be able to get Mike McDaniel as an offensive coordinator, I feel like you guys don't need me to explain how big of a luxury that is. This feels almost like the offensive version of getting Brian Flores as your defensive coordinator if you're the Vikings. Like, this is one of these schematic geniuses of the NFL who might, and ironically, both former Dolphins guys, former Dolphins head coaches. But yeah, I mean, Mike McDaniel is really good at this, especially as an offensive coordinator. By the way, when I was talking about big names hitting next year's coaching cycle, Mike McDaniel, that's the one downside to this, is this is a 1-year thing. Like, you gotta start to think about who else is going to be in the mix for you after this, because with Justin Herbert, offensive lineman getting back healthy, a healthy season of Marion Hampton and Kamani Vidal, all these playmakers, I see a lot of opportunity for Ladd McConkey in this offense. Those quick hitting inbreakers off of play action, Herbert's good at those. I really, Ladd isn't Tyreek Hill, but in terms of, can you ask him to run those quick hitting inbreakers off of play action? Absolutely, Ladd McConkey can do that. I think Ladd McConkey has an awesome year here. A lot of fun pieces for him to work with. Oronde Gadsden. We actually saw Mike McDaniel finally get a good tight end in Darren Waller and did some really good stuff there. And Jonnu Smith the year before that. So there's a lot to be excited about this. It's just, that he's probably gone after a year. So it kind of puts a little extra urgency on Herbert to show up in the playoffs. Easier said than done, apparently. And it sucks that you lost Jesse Minter. Again, sometimes timing just isn't always on your side. They're going to have to figure things out defensively, man. And I actually kind of forgot who the Chargers hired as defensive coordinator. I didn't write that down, but who did they land with? Chris O'Leary. Okay. I'm going to assume he's a part of the Mike Macdonald system, but let me confirm. Apparently there's a Chris O'Leary artist. Yeah, so he was here in 2024. Interesting. So that actually would have been that was Jesse Minter's first year. He was their safeties coach. So he was only here for a year, and then he went to Western Michigan to be their defensive coordinator. So he's young. He's 34 years old, really a college guy, but they think he's their Jesse Minter, basically. So I'm assuming the scheme is going to change, and hopefully he can do a good job. So that makes sense as a hire, I suppose. I'm not super familiar with him, but I trust for the most part that Jim Harbaugh can make the right hire there. So good hires for the Chargers, and that is all we've got. That should be everything. Again, there's a couple different guys, I think Frank Smith went to the Vikings. Like there's guys that are underneath prominent head coaches that are in control of their side of the ball that I just, cut short this show We're right at 2 hours here, so it's a good time to say our goodbyes. Really fun show, incredible coaching cycle, 10 new head coaches, a historic amount of shift and change in the coaching structures around the NFL. Really, really a fun show. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. If you're here on YouTube, please do hit that like button. If you're listening back to this on the Fully Inflated Football podcast feed where I'm going to upload it, if you can leave a review for the show, I really appreciate it. Of course, Garrett, thank you for the time. Everyone go check out the Football Analysis YouTube channel. As far as what's coming next from me, I have family coming in town. We have Anna's parents are coming in to help with some house projects to adjust some stuff for the baby on the way. And I don't know exactly when I'll be sitting down to record and stuff. I do want to cover the Super Bowl. Even though I laughed about this the last time we were live, Super Bowl coverage actually tends to be some of my least well-performing content because 30 out of 32 NFL fans don't really care to hear about how great the Super Bowl teams are. But I owe it to Patriots and Seahawks fans to get something out there. So hopefully at some point I can at least spend 20 minutes with a little, snippet of my thoughts on the Super Bowl, if nothing else. So want to get that in there. And then I am in the process of putting together my wide receiver rankings video for the upcoming NFL draft. I've got, I think, 27 evals done. So the evaluation side of things is almost ready. And then putting that video together takes a day or two. So don't know exactly when that's going to drop, but within the next 4 or 5 days for sure. So what is it, Wednesday? Yeah, I would say at the worst, we're looking at next Monday, but hopefully sooner. We'll see. That's all I got, though. Thank you guys. Love you guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and cheers.